So Oswald's saying, I want to get back in the United States. And they're saying, well, we can let you back in, and we've got some stuff we'd like you to do. And the fact that Oswald was from a mafia family in New Orleans put him in position to spy on Carlos Marcello's organization for Bobby Kennedy. And Bobby Kennedy was at war with the mafia, particularly with Carlos Marcello. It was so bad that Bobby had him kidnapped and put on an airplane and flown to Guatemala and dropped in Guatemala without a passport to see how he got back in. I mean, these are the kind of tactics that were being used. Oh. And Bobby Kennedy said, I'm going to use underworld tactics on the underworld. So, I'm put forth a proposition, and it's really an idea that needs to be investigated more. But the idea that Oswald was reporting through somebody else, but up to Bobby Kennedy, and he was spying on the mafia and the CIA for the Attorney General.
Was Jim Garrison aware of any of this, the district attorney at the time?
Well, I don't think Garrison understood the dimensions of what he was getting into. It reminds me of the old Rocky and Bullwinkle thing where, Rocky says, hey, Bullwinkle, watch him pull a rabbit out of his hat, and it turns out to be a bear or a lion or something. I mean, that's kind of what Garrison thought he was investigating the murder of the president, and he was, but he didn't realize the dimensions. I mean, one of the things is Bobby Kennedy sent people down to shut Garrison up. Why?
Yeah.
Because Bobby Kennedy wanted to deal with it his way, and there's a lot of reliable reports that says the moment that Bobby Kennedy, from people that were in the office with him, said the moment Bobby Kennedy was told that they had arrested Lee Oswald, he picked up the telephone, called McCone over at the CIA, and said, did your people kill my brother?
Unbelievable. What a story. Let's go back to Skype. Bill is in Honolulu. Go ahead, Bill. Oh, Bill.
It's a button problem.
There is no Bill. That's it for Bill. No more. Let's go to Granbury, Texas. Vincent, go ahead.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Hey, Vincent.
Hello.
Fascinating study you got going here. I'm a little perplexed by the Lee Harvey Oswald connection. Sounds kind of like Philip K. Dick and James Elroy partying with Alex Jones, but I will leave that till I read the book. My question is, you're talking about a 300% spike in cancer rates since 60?
No, since our grandparents, and that's from USA Today, and that's from Deborah Davis, who was a public health service officer's comment.
Oh, okay. Does that correlate with the rest of the world, or is it just in America? And if it is worldwide, how many other nations were using our vaccine? That's my question. I'll take the answer off the air.
Good question. Go ahead.
The data that I have access to is mostly American data. There are comments from Maurice Hilleman, whose video is on my website, where they're actually joking about the Americans winning the Olympics because the Russian athletes are so weighed down by tumors from the polio vaccine that they won't be able to compete. What's interesting is the Scandinavians, meaning Norway and Sweden and such, looked at our polio vaccine and rejected it. And they said, first of all, polio, which is essentially everywhere. The virus is all over the place. And usually it goes in your mouth and out your bottom, and it doesn't cause disease. And in fact, even at the height of the polio vaccine, if you exposed 100 children to the polio virus, 95 of them or 94 of them showed no symptoms at all. 4 or 5 would show flu-like symptoms, and it was only 1 out of 100 that was actually coming down with polio. And so from the Scandinavian point of view, it was not a major public health crisis, and they looked at the vaccines and they saw all these strange viruses in there, and they said, we are unwilling to inoculate our population with a vaccine that's full of a bunch of monkey viruses that we don't understand the consequences of, all in order to get rid of a disease that's not a problem for us. So they rejected. They said the question here is, why are the Americans in such a hysteria about this? And I think that's a very interesting question because polio tended to strike the children of the wealthy for some reason. And then you get the FDR thing in there. And what you've got is you had a media-driven hysteria about polio. I mean, Americans were walking around in armbands gathering money.
It was like the bubonic plague, was it?
Yeah. I mean, but it was more of a, I mean, there was 35,000 cases of polio a year, and it was called an epidemic. Okay? We have 1.5 million cases of cancer a year now, and it's not called an epidemic. I mean, there's 200,000 cases of prostate cancer a year, and it's not called an epidemic. Why not? I mean, it's the media is playing a role in this whole thing.
All right, back to the phones we go. Sandy's in Cleveland. Go ahead, Sandy.
Hi. Oh, this is a wonderful, wonderful show. Edward, can you explain the reasons and reasonings behind something I remember from childhood in the 50s and 60s? I remember that there were instances of people who had developed cancer, were being treated for cancer or possibly even dying from cancer, being fired from work, losing their jobs because there was a public belief that, in some cases, that cancer was contagious and they didn't want to contaminate the workplace for the other employees. And I remember there were lawsuits brought about this, that the family of or the person who had the cancer would sue the employer over this. And at some point, I seem to remember in the late 60s, maybe early 70s, suddenly, I don't know if it was the American Cancer Society that was being formed or something, but somehow there was a public push to educate, quote unquote, the general populace about the cause of cancer, that it's not contagious, there's nothing to worry about, this is all ignorance, and it adds insult to injury to the patient. Do you recall anything like that, or do you have any comment about it?
Oh, I'm reminded of the peasants at Dr. Frankenstein's castle when you say all that. First of all, it's a great question, and you articulated a lot of things. There is the tendency to blame the victim of a lot of things, and when there is accountability, particularly, and you're from the Ohio area, there's a lot of pollution up there. There's a lot of concerns that the cancer might be coming from something the company is doing, and therefore we would like to get rid of the people with the cancer so we don't have employees around with cancer making it look like we're doing something that's dangerous. And there's a lot of that. The famous case of that has to do with the asbestos. And W.R. Grace ran the asbestos mines, and Grace also sat, the man, W.R. Grace, sat on the board of directors of Tulane, which
they're still in bankruptcy, too, over all of this, aren't they?
Yeah. But what happened during that was in the trial, they got into what is causing the cancer. And the people defending W.R. Grace, and the charge was that the asbestos was causing the cancer, they started saying, no, it's this monkey virus in the polio vaccine. And they got international experts to come in and testify for it. And that's why we know a lot about this today, is because we got that courtroom testimony.
Ed, when we come back, we're going to take final phone calls with you right here on Coast to Coast AM. Well, on our next Coast to Coast program, Friday into Saturday morning, we'll be talking with the dead, case books of American ghost hunters, and then we'll have open lines on Coast to Coast AM. And when we come back, final phone calls with our special guest, Ed Haslam, Dr. Mary's Monkey on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, back at you. Let's go to the final calls. We'll go to Ilona in New Jersey. You're up with us east of the Rockies. Hi there.
Hi. First of all, I want to say I read the book, and it's excellent. I couldn't put it down.
Thank you.
Okay, my question is, if cancer is a virus and a trophoblast, there are cures today. I know that. Why aren't they allowed? Is human life so cheap? Is it population control? Who's dictating this?
George, would you like to answer that?
Well, I don't know who's dictating this. It's the unknown. It's the shadow government.
Yeah.
It's the Illuminati. It's the higher ups that have so much power, so much wealth that the rest becomes a game.
Mm-hmm.